The injured bobcat was left to die in the woods. But then an unexpected savior appeared. The first rays of dawn kissed the granite peaks of the Sierra Nevada, painting the rugged landscape in hues of gold and rose. A cool mist clung to the valleys, shrouding the towering pines in an ethereal veil. High above, on a rocky ledge overlooking the vast wilderness, a bobcat stretched languidly, its amber eyes gleaming in the morning light. This was Shadow, a magnificent creature in its prime. The sleek, tawny coat blended seamlessly with the dappled shadows of the forest floor. Its powerful muscles rippled beneath its spotted fur as it moved with the effortless grace of a born hunter. Shadow was the undisputed ruler of this domain, its keen senses alert to every rustle of leaves, every chirp of a bird, every scent carried on the wind. The bobcat's territory encompassed a vast expanse of rugged terrain, from the dense pine forests of the lower slopes to the alpine meadows that carpeted the high country. Shadow knew every hidden trail, every rocky outcrop, every secret watering hole within its realm. It was a world of towering trees, cascading waterfalls, and hidden canyons, a world where the bobcat reigned supreme. This morning, Shadow was on the hunt. Its keen eyes scanned the undergrowth, searching for the telltale flicker of movement that would betray the presence of prey. A family of quail, foraging amongst the fallen leaves, caught its attention. With a silent stalk, Shadow crept closer, its body low to the ground, its movements fluid and precise. The quail, oblivious to the danger lurking nearby, continued their search for seeds and insects. Shadow paused, gathering its muscles for the final pounce. In a flash of tawny fur, it launched itself forward, its powerful legs propelling it through the air. The quail scattered in panic, their wings beating frantically, but it was too late. Shadow's claws lashed out, snaring one of the birds in its deadly grip. The successful hunt brought a surge of satisfaction. Shadow carried its prize to a secluded spot, savoring the taste of fresh meat. The sun climbed higher in the sky, casting long shadows across the mountainside. The bobcat, its hunger sated, settled down for a midday rest, its keen senses still alert to the sounds of the forest. Life was good for Shadow. It was a life of freedom and independence, a life lived on its own terms. The wildcat was perfectly adapted to its environment, a master of survival in this rugged and unforgiving landscape. But fate, as it often does, had other plans. The tranquility of the afternoon was shattered by a sharp, metallic clang that echoed through the canyons. Shadow, startled from its slumber, lifted its head, its ears twitching, its eyes scanning the surrounding woods for the source of the disturbance. Curiosity, a trait not uncommon in felines, both wild and domestic, piqued its interest. The sound seemed to have originated from a secluded ravine, a place Shadow rarely ventured. A faint, unfamiliar scent, carried on the breeze, further fueled its curiosity. With cautious steps, the bobcat descended from its rocky perch, its instincts warning it of potential danger, yet its curiosity urging it forward. The ravine was a tangle of dense undergrowth and fallen logs, the air thick with the smell of damp earth and decaying leaves. Shadow moved with stealth, its padded paws making no sound on the soft forest floor. As it ventured deeper into the ravine, the metallic scent grew stronger, mingled with the pungent odor of something Shadow recognized: rabbit. A clearing opened up ahead, and Shadow paused, concealed behind a thicket of ferns. In the center of the clearing lay a freshly killed rabbit, its fur matted with blood. Beside it, a glint of metal caught the bobcat's eye. It was a trap, a cruel device of steel jaws and serrated teeth, designed to snare unsuspecting prey. Shadow had encountered such traps before, though rarely in this part of its territory. It knew the danger they posed, the agonizing pain they inflicted. Yet, the sight of the dead rabbit, so close and seemingly easy to claim, stirred its hunger. Caution warred with temptation. Shadow circled the clearing, its keen eyes assessing the situation. The trap was well hidden, its jaws concealed beneath a layer of leaves and twigs. The rabbit, placed strategically as bait, was an irresistible lure, Hunger, coupled with a sense of confidence in its own agility, overcame Shadow's caution. It crept closer, its movements deliberate, its eyes fixed on the trap. With a calculated leap, it reached for the rabbit, aiming to snatch the prize and retreat before the trap could spring. But the trapper had anticipated such a move. The trap was positioned perfectly, its trigger mechanism sensitive to the slightest touch. As Shadow's paw brushed against the bait, the jaws snapped shut with lightning speed, clamping down on the bobcat's foreleg with bone-crushing force. A scream of pain ripped through the silence of the ravine. Shadow thrashed wildly, its body contorting in agony, its claws raking at the unforgiving steel. But the trap held firm, its serrated teeth digging deeper into the bobcat's flesh. Panic surged through Shadow's veins as it realized the extent of its predicament. It was caught, trapped, its freedom snatched away in an instant. The forest, once a familiar haven, now seemed like a prison. The scent of the rabbit, once a promise of a meal, now reeked of betrayal. Shadow, the proud hunter, was now the hunted, its life hanging in the balance. The sun began its descent, casting long, ominous shadows across the ravine. Shadow's struggles grew weaker, its energy sapped by pain and fear. The trap held firm, a cruel reminder of its vulnerability. The once vibrant wildcat was now a picture of despair, its fur matted with blood and sweat, its amber eyes clouded with pain. The initial shock of capture gave way to a gnawing fear. Shadow had never felt so helpless, so exposed. The forest, once a sanctuary, now echoed with unseen threats. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, sent shivers of dread down its spine. The wildcat's instincts screamed at it to flee, to escape the danger, but the steel jaws held it captive. Nightfall brought a chilling drop in temperature. The once comforting darkness now seemed to press in on Shadow, amplifying its sense of isolation. The wildcat shivered, not just from the cold but also from the fear that gnawed at its soul. It longed for the warmth of its den, the familiar scents of the forest, the comforting sounds of the night. Hunger pangs added to its misery. The scent of the dead rabbit, now tainted with the metallic tang of blood and steel, mocked its empty stomach. Thirst parched its throat, but there was no water within reach. Shadow licked its dry lips, tasting the bitterness of despair. As the hours crept by, Shadow's thoughts drifted to its past. It remembered the thrill of the hunt, the satisfaction of a successful kill, the joy of exploring its vast territory. It remembered the warmth of the sun on its fur, the coolness of the mountain streams, the scent of pine needles after a rain shower. These memories, once so vivid, now seemed distant and unreal, like fragments of a dream fading with the dawn. A deep sense of loneliness washed over Shadow. It had always been a solitary creature, but now, in its hour of need, it yearned for companionship. It longed for the touch of another creature, the reassurance of a friendly presence. But there was only the cold steel of the trap, the unforgiving darkness, and the gnawing fear that this was the end. As the moon climbed high in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the ravine, Shadow's spirit waned. The struggle ceased, its body grew still. Only its eyes, wide and filled with a haunting sadness, betrayed the life that still flickered within. The wildcat, once a symbol of strength and freedom, was now a prisoner of fate, its future uncertain, its life hanging by a thread. The morning mist hung heavy in the ravine, shrouding the injured bobcat in a veil of secrecy. Shadow lay motionless, its breathing shallow, its body succumbing to the combined assault of pain, cold, and exhaustion. The trap remained clamped firmly on its foreleg, a cruel testament to its captivity. A faint sound broke the silence, the crunch of footsteps on dry leaves. Shadow's ears twitched, its eyes flickered open. A figure emerged from the mist, a human, clad in worn denim and a faded flannel shirt. A weathered face, etched with the lines of a life lived outdoors, peered cautiously into the clearing. The human, a man named Jake, was a solitary soul who lived a simple life in a cabin nestled deep within the forest. He was a man of few words, a keen observer of nature, and a protector of its creatures. He had ventured into this remote ravine, following the faint trail of a wounded deer, when he stumbled upon the trapped bobcat. Jake's heart went out to the creature. He saw the pain in its eyes, the despair in its posture. He knew the suffering such traps inflicted, the slow, agonizing death they brought. He couldn't bear to leave the bobcat to such a fate. Approaching cautiously, Jake knelt beside the trapped animal. Shadow, sensing the human's presence, let out a low growl, a warning that despite its weakened state, it was still a wild creature capable of defending itself. But there was no aggression in its eyes, only fear and pain. Jake spoke softly, his voice a calming rumble that echoed through the stillness of the ravine. "Easy there, fella. I ain't gonna hurt ya. Just wanna help." He kept his movements slow and deliberate, avoiding any sudden gestures that might startle the bobcat. Reaching into his backpack, Jake pulled out a pair of thick leather gloves and a small bottle of water. He carefully poured some water onto the bobcat's parched tongue, watching as the animal lapped it up gratefully. Then, with gentle hands, he examined the trapped leg, assessing the extent of the injury. The trap had dug deep, the steel jaws cutting into flesh and bone. Jake winced at the sight, but his resolve to help the creature only grew stronger. He knew he couldn't release the bobcat from the trap without risking further injury. He needed to get it back to his cabin, where he could tend to its wounds properly. With a reassuring pat on the bobcat's head, Jake set about his task. He carefully lifted the trap, supporting the bobcat's weight to minimize its pain. Shadow, sensing the human's intentions, remained surprisingly calm, its initial fear replaced by a flicker of hope. The journey back to the cabin was slow and arduous. Jake, burdened by the weight of the trap and the bobcat, navigated the treacherous terrain with care. Shadow, its body racked with pain, endured the journey with stoic resilience. As they emerged from the ravine and into the familiar surroundings of the forest, a sense of relief washed over both man and beast. The first rays of dawn broke through the canopy, casting a golden light on their path. It was a new day, a day that held the promise of healing and hope. Jake's cabin was a rustic haven, nestled amidst a grove of towering pines. Built from rough-hewn logs and weathered by years of sun and rain, it blended seamlessly with its surroundings. Inside, the cabin was a testament to Jake's simple lifestyle, a cozy living space with a stone fireplace, a well-worn armchair, and shelves filled with books on nature and wildlife. Jake gently placed the trap and its captive on a soft rug near the fireplace. Shadow, exhausted and in pain, lay still, its eyes following Jake's every move. The warmth of the fire and the unfamiliar surroundings offered a strange comfort to the wildcat, a respite from the cold and fear of the ravine. With a practiced hand, Jake gathered his tools, a first aid kit, a pair of pliers, and a sturdy wooden crate. He approached Shadow cautiously, speaking in soothing tones to calm the animal. "All right, fella, let's get this contraption off ya." Shadow watched with wary eyes as Jake knelt beside the trap. The bobcat tensed, anticipating the pain, but Jake's touch was surprisingly gentle. He worked with care, using the pliers to slowly pry open the steel jaws. With a final click, the trap sprang open, releasing its captive. Shadow let out a soft whimper as the pressure on its leg was released. Jake examined the injured limb, his brow furrowed in concern. The wound was deep, the flesh torn and bloody. He carefully cleaned the wound, applying antiseptic and bandaging it with a practiced hand. Exhausted but relieved, Shadow settled into the crate, which Jake had lined with a soft blanket. The wildcat watched as Jake prepared a makeshift bed for himself on the floor nearby. A sense of security, unfamiliar yet welcome, settled over Shadow. It was the first time in days that it felt safe, protected from the harsh realities of the wild. The days that followed were a blur of pain and healing. Jake tended to Shadow's wounds with meticulous care, changing the bandages regularly and ensuring the bobcat had plenty of fresh water and food. He brought small pieces of cooked meat, leaving them near the crate for Shadow to eat when it felt ready. Shadow, initially wary of its human caretaker, gradually began to trust Jake. It would allow him to approach the crate, even accepting gentle strokes on its head. The wildcat's amber eyes, once filled with fear and pain, now held a glimmer of gratitude and something akin to affection. Jake, in turn, found himself growing attached to the bobcat. He spent hours observing the creature, marveling at its resilience and its quiet dignity. He talked to Shadow, sharing stories of his life in the woods, his observations of nature, his thoughts and feelings. The cabin, once filled with the silence of solitude, now echoed with the soft purring of a wildcat and the gentle murmur of a human voice. A bond was forming, an unlikely friendship between man and beast, born out of compassion and shared vulnerability. As the days turned into weeks, Shadow's physical wounds began to heal. The swelling in its legs subsided, the pain lessened, and the bobcat regained some of its former strength. It started to venture out of the crate, exploring the confines of the cabin with cautious curiosity. Jake encouraged Shadow's explorations, creating a safe and stimulating environment for the recovering wildcat. He scattered toys around the cabin, a ball of yarn, a stuffed mouse, a feather tied to a string. He left the windows open, allowing Shadow to observe the sights and sounds of the forest. Shadow, initially hesitant, gradually responded to Jake's efforts. It would bat at the toys, stalk the feather, and watch the birds flitting among the trees outside the window. These playful interactions brought a spark of joy back into the bobcat's eyes, a reminder of its innate wild spirit. However, Shadow's wild instincts remained strong. It would often hiss or growl when Jake approached too quickly or tried to touch it without warning. Jake understood these reactions, respecting the bobcat's need for space and autonomy. He continued to approach Shadow with patience and gentleness, building trust gradually. One evening, as Jake sat by the fireplace reading, Shadow approached him cautiously. It circled him a few times, sniffing the air, before finally rubbing its head against Jake's leg. Jake, surprised and delighted, reached out and gently stroked the bobcat's fur. Shadow purred, a deep rumbling sound that vibrated through its body. This simple act of affection marked a turning point in their relationship. Shadow began to seek out Jake's company, often curling up at his feet or sitting on the arm of his chair. It would greet him with a soft meow when he returned from his daily chores, and it would follow him around the cabin like a devoted companion. Jake, in turn, found himself increasingly drawn to Shadow's wild spirit. He admired the bobcat's independence, its resilience, its connection to the natural world. He felt a sense of responsibility towards the creature, a desire to protect it from harm and ensure its well-being. Their bond deepened, transcending the boundaries between man and beast. They communicated through a language of touch, sounds, and gestures. Jake learned to read Shadow's moods, anticipating its needs and respecting its boundaries. Shadow, in turn, learned to trust Jake implicitly, relying on him for safety and companionship. The cabin in the woods, once a solitary retreat, had become a shared sanctuary, a place where a man and a wildcat found solace, friendship, and a connection that defied the laws of nature. Winter descended upon the Sierra Nevada, blanketing the landscape in a pristine white. The cabin, nestled amidst snow-laden pines, became a cozy refuge from the biting wind and icy temperatures. Inside, a fire crackled merrily in the hearth, casting a warm glow over the rustic interior. Shadow, now fully recovered from its injuries, had adapted well to its new life. The wildcat, once a creature of the untamed wilderness, had found a strange comfort in the confines of the cabin. It spent its days curled up by the fire, watching the snow fall outside the window, or playfully chasing after dust motes dancing in the sunbeams. Yet, despite its contentment, a part of Shadow remained wild, untamed. Jake recognized this, sensing the bobcat's innate need for freedom, for the vast expanse of the forest, for the thrill of the hunt. He knew that keeping Shadow confined to the cabin was not a long-term solution. One crisp winter morning, Jake decided to take Shadow outside. He bundled up in his warmest clothes, donned his thick gloves, and cautiously opened the cabin door. Shadow hesitated at the threshold, its amber eyes wide with apprehension. The sight of the snow-covered landscape, the unfamiliar crunch of ice beneath its paws, stirred a primal instinct within the bobcat. With a gentle nudge from Jake, Shadow ventured out into the winter wonderland. The cold air stung its nostrils, the snow chilled its paws, but a sense of exhilaration coursed through its veins. It bounded through the snowdrifts, its lithe body leaving graceful tracks on the pristine surface. Jake watched with a smile as Shadow explored its surroundings. The bobcat chased after snowflakes, pounced on snow-covered branches, and rolled playfully in the powdery snow. Its movements were fluid and graceful, a testament to its wild instincts. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the snow, Jake called Shadow back to the cabin. The bobcat hesitated, its gaze lingering on the vast expanse of the forest. Jake understood its longing, the call of the wild that echoed within its soul. Back inside the cabin, Jake sat by the fire, deep in thought. He knew he couldn't keep Shadow confined forever. The bobcat deserved to live its life in the wild, where it belonged. But the thought of letting go, of losing the companionship that had brought so much joy into his life, filled him with sadness. He looked at Shadow, curled up asleep by the fire, its fur gleaming in the firelight. A wave of affection washed over him. He had come to love this wild creature, this creature that had entered his life so unexpectedly and touched his heart so profoundly. Jake knew what he had to do. He would prepare Shadow for its return to the wild, help it regain its hunting skills, its instincts, its independence. It would be a difficult process, a bittersweet parting, but it was the right thing to do. The decision made, Jake embarked on a new mission, to reawaken the wild instincts that lay dormant within Shadow. He knew it wouldn't be easy. The bobcat had grown accustomed to the comforts of the cabin, the regular meals, the warmth of the fire, and the companionship of a human. But Jake was determined to give Shadow the best chance of survival in the wild. He started by gradually reducing Shadow's dependence on him. He spaced out the feeding times, encouraging the bobcat to hunt for its own food. He left trails of scent around the cabin, leading to hidden caches of meat, simulating the thrill of the chase. He even brought live prey, mice, squirrels, rabbits for Shadow to stalk and capture within the confines of the cabin. Shadow, initially confused by these changes, gradually adapted. Its hunting instincts, honed by generations of wild ancestors, began to resurface. It stalked its prey with stealth and precision, its movements fluid and silent. The thrill of the chase, the satisfaction of a successful kill, rekindled the wild spirit within the bobcat. Jake also began taking Shadow on longer excursions into the forest. He would lead the bobcat through the snow-covered trails, pointing out signs of wildlife, teaching it to identify different scents and sounds. He showed Shadow how to climb trees, how to navigate through dense undergrowth, how to avoid potential dangers. These outings were both exhilarating and challenging for Shadow. The bobcat reveled in the freedom of the forest, the vast expanse of its natural habitat. But it also faced new challenges, the unpredictable weather, the competition for food, the threat of other predators. Jake watched with pride as Shadow navigated these challenges. The bobcat was learning, adapting, rediscovering its wild instincts. It was becoming stronger, more confident, more independent. One day, during a particularly long excursion, Shadow caught a scent that made its ears prick up and its whiskers twitch. It was the scent of a deer, a large, healthy buck, grazing in a nearby clearing. Shadow's eyes gleamed with excitement, its muscles tensed in anticipation. Jake watched as Shadow stalked the deer, its movements silent and deliberate. The bobcat crept closer, its body low to the ground, its eyes fixed on its prey. Then, with a sudden burst of speed, it launched itself forward, its claws extended, its jaws open wide. The deer, startled by the sudden attack, reared up on its hind legs, its hooves flailing wildly. But Shadow was too quick, too agile. It leaped onto the deer's back, sinking its claws into the thick hide. The deer bucked and twisted, trying to shake off its attacker, but Shadow held on tight. After a brief struggle, the deer collapsed, its strength spent. Shadow, victorious, stood over its kill, its chest heaving, its fur matted with blood. Jake watched from a distance, his heart filled with a mixture of pride and sadness. He knew then that Shadow was ready. The bobcat had regained its wild instincts, its ability to survive in the harsh realities of the forest. It was time to let go, to set it free. The day of Shadow's release dawned crisp and clear, the winter sun casting a golden glow over the snow-covered landscape. Jake stood at the edge of the forest, his heart heavy with emotion. Beside him, Shadow paced restlessly, its amber eyes fixed on the vast expanse of wilderness that lay before it. Jake knelt down, placing a hand on Shadow's head. The bobcat nuzzled against his touch, a gesture of affection and gratitude. Jake felt a lump forming in his throat. He had grown to love this wild creature, this creature that had entered his life so unexpectedly and touched his heart so profoundly. "Go on, Shadow," Jake whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Go back to where you belong." Shadow hesitated for a moment, as if sensing the finality of the parting. Then, with a graceful leap, it bounded into the forest, its lithe body disappearing amongst the trees. Jake watched as the bobcat vanished from sight, a single tear rolling down his cheek. He stood there for a long time, listening to the sounds of the forest, the rustle of leaves, the chirping of birds, the distant call of a hawk. He imagined Shadow out there, exploring its territory, hunting for its prey, living its life in the wild. A sense of emptiness washed over him. The cabin, once filled with the presence of the bobcat, now felt strangely silent. He missed Shadow's soft purring, its playful antics, its companionship, but he knew he had done the right thing. He returned to the cabin, the silence echoing around him. He went about his daily chores, his movements mechanical, his mind preoccupied with thoughts of Shadow. He wondered how the bobcat was faring, whether it was safe, whether it was happy. Days turned into weeks and the weeks into months. Jake continued his solitary life in the woods, but the memory of Shadow remained vivid in his mind. He often found himself looking towards the forest, hoping to catch a glimpse of the bobcat. One spring morning, as Jake was tending to his garden, he heard a familiar sound, a soft meow, close by. He turned around and his heart leaped with joy. There, at the edge of the clearing, stood Shadow. The bobcat looked healthy and strong, its fur gleaming in the sunlight. It approached Jake cautiously, its amber eyes filled with a mixture of curiosity and affection. Jake knelt down, his arms outstretched. Shadow hesitated for a moment, then leaped into his embrace. Jake held the bobcat close, tears streaming down his face. He felt a surge of joy, a sense of completeness he hadn't realized he was missing. Shadow purred contentedly, its body vibrating against his chest. In that moment, Jake knew that their bond was stronger than ever. Shadow had returned not as a dependent pet, but as a wild creature choosing to share its life with him. It was a testament to the power of their connection, a connection that transcended the boundaries between man and beast. Shadow's return marked a new chapter in their shared life. It was a delicate balance, a harmonious coexistence between the wild and the tame. Shadow would spend days, sometimes weeks, roaming the forest, answering the call of its wild instincts, hunting, exploring, and asserting its dominance in its territory. But it would always return to the cabin, seeking the comfort of Jake's presence, the warmth of the fire, and the familiar scent of home. Jake, in turn, respected Shadow's freedom, understanding the bobcat's need to live its life on its own terms. He never tried to confine Shadow, never tried to tame its wild spirit. He simply offered a safe haven, a place of refuge, a constant in the ever-changing cycle of nature. Their bond deepened, evolving into a unique companionship. They would spend hours together, exploring the forest, observing the wildlife, sharing quiet moments of contentment. Jake would talk to Shadow, sharing his thoughts, his feelings, his observations of the world around them. Shadow would listen, its amber eyes fixed on Jake's face, its presence a comforting reassurance. As the years passed, Jake grew older, his hair turning silver, his movements slowing. Shadow, too, showed signs of aging, its once vibrant coat now streaked with gray, its movements less agile. But their bond remained strong, a testament to the enduring power of friendship. One day, Jake fell ill. He was confined to his bed, his body weakened by fever and fatigue. Shadow stayed by his side, its presence a constant comfort. It would curl up on the bed, its warmth soothing Jake's aching body. It would lick his hand, its rough tongue a gentle caress. Jake knew his time was drawing near. He looked at Shadow, his eyes filled with love and gratitude. "Thank you, my friend," he whispered, his voice weak but filled with emotion. "You brought joy into my life, a joy I never thought possible." Shadow nuzzled against Jake's hand, its purr a soft rumble of reassurance. Jake closed his eyes, a peaceful smile gracing his lips. He took his last breath, his hand resting on Shadow's fur. Shadow stayed by Jake's side long after he was gone, its presence a silent vigil. Then, with a heavy heart, it left the cabin, venturing back into the wilderness. It carried with it the memories of their shared life, the lessons of love and friendship, the enduring bond that had defied the boundaries between man and beast. Shadow lived out its days in the wild, a wise and respected elder of its kind. It passed on its knowledge to its offspring, ensuring the survival of its lineage. And when its time came, it passed peacefully, its spirit returning to the wilderness it had always called home. The story of Jake and Shadow became a legend, whispered among the trees, carried on the wind, a testament to the enduring power of connection, the beauty of nature, and the circle of life that binds us all.